It's gone.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I would say it's good to see everybody, and it is good to see everybody that's here, but literally 30 seconds before we started, Dr. Ricks dropped out of the podcast here, so we're waiting for him to come back. In the meantime, we'll introduce this week's program, and I'm sure everybody can identify being on at least one end of this, and that's gossip and how we should hold our tongue. And I guess we can stop talking now about Dr. Rick because he's back, so we can refrain from gossiping about him. So I see you made it back. We introduced the show.
I have no idea what happened. The computer just decided to dump the connection.
Decided again.
Weird. He froze up for a second there, but I think you're good to go now. Why don't you start us off?
I guess we're ready to start, right, gentlemen?
Yes.
Okay.
We are live.
I'm not sure. We're hearing echoes. Okay, I'm going to start with a joke called Flu Square Dance. Flu Square Dance. Choose your partners, one and all, aspirin, Advil, or Tylenol. Tylenol. Now fling those covers with all you've got. 1 minute cold, the next minute hot. Circle right to the side of the bed. Grab the tissues and Sudafed. Back to the middle, don't goof off. Hold your stomach and cough, cough, cough. Forget about slippers, dash down the hall. Toss your cookies in the shower stall. Remember on the brink, wash your hands. The doorknob, the light switch too. Now you've got it, you're doing the flu. Some like it cold, some like it hot. If you like neither, then get the shot.
Oh my.
That was great.
Okay, in the news of this past week, 2 elections caught my eye. You know, Netanyahu won the election, but he couldn't form, the Likud party couldn't form a majority coalition because many of the partners in their parliament that he normally partners up with, for some reason they fought about positions and other issues, which I can't understand, so they couldn't, and the deadline was running out. So he had to partner up with a far-right religious group, I think it's called Jewish Home. And I was thinking, so now the government of Israel is further to the right, more conservative than they were before, which is not, American media doesn't like that. And my thought is, if bad things happen, the religious side of his government is going to push for a temple. I mean, don't you see how it's kind of works slowly moving in that direction?
It could be. It definitely, it could be. There seems to be a progression, kind of a general progression in that direction.
You can see God's hand in everything, though.
I thought all along Israel can rely on America to resupply them the best weapons in the world and technology and satellite, all that sort of thing, which is very helpful in war. Saved them in '74, better than the Russian weapons the Arabs had. But now that they can no longer rely on America, they may have to do the unthinkable and rely on God. By the way, the majority of the Jewish group, majority of Israel, I mean, they're Jewish and they like Passover and other things, but I'm told they're not that religious. I mean, there are religious groups there, Hasidic Jews and others, but the majority of the Israeli population is not that religious.
I've heard that as well. And some of them that I've met certainly don't seem to be.
So this move to the right is probably something that nobody expected, but it might put, if something goes bad, they might just build a temple. And that's just, or this will move them in that direction as time goes on. And the other election is interesting. NBC News said, and a few others, they were sure the Conservative Tory party was out in England, the leftists would win. Because what the Tory party did in England the last 2 years, they cut back their big government bureaucracy. They cut 1 million government workers and other programs, and they reduced government spending and reduced their deficit. Can you imagine a country in Europe that, besides Germany, that's reducing its deficit?
No, no.
And the British
Greece is still trying to. I'll just say Greece is still trying to get war reparations out of Germany to help balance their budget. They're so desperate right now.
And I hear Italy and Spain are in different kinds of problems, but it's not good in Europe. I mean, as far as fiscal responsibility goes. But so everyone thought, because the Labor Party can say they're starving people by cutting some of these social programs, and the election would be a disaster. One guy NBC said out, guaranteed he'd eat his hat if the Tories could possibly scrape by a victory. Not only did the Tories win, they won an outright majority. They don't have to partner with anybody, which is a shock. The reason why that may be important, Obama sent Axelrod, his campaign manager, to help the Labor Party in England to get the Tories out of power, and it backfired, just like in Israel. Do you all see where that could be a good sign for the immediate future?
Things are looking so similar to pre-World War II worldwide. The different nations that are rising to power, the coalitions that they're forming. I don't know how much longer we can sustain this debt that we are having in this country. I'm hearing about lots and lots of stores and businesses going out of business. They closed a Walmart up in a little town by us. That was 400 people lost their jobs in a day.
Wow.
And 133 Target stores are closing. I'm hearing something, and don't quote me on some of these numbers, but something like a few hundred, I guess, McDonald's are closing.
Wow.
Yes, that's true.
And then bigger stores like Macy's and Kmart, they're shutting down a ton of those stores.
And
So
Sears cutting back some stores too.
yes. So the economy it's a mess right now. And I don't know how long you can sustain this.
They recently closed the majority of the Radio Shacks. There's a bunch of consolidation and store closings going on with the whole Office Max, Office Depot merger. This year, 2015, is going to be a huge year for businesses closing, I think, and consolidating and cutting back. There's going to be, there's already, according to the numbers, almost 100 million people not in the workforce in this country. 93 million people.
They stopped looking.
They just dropped out.
This so-called economic revival that they claim we're having is really based on just paper and ink, isn't it?
False numbers, phony numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
Here's something I heard the other day. And I don't remember all the details. The last 2 weeks they came out with unemployment number and employment numbers. The first quarter, as you know, was almost no growth at all. Now they blame that on the bad weather, and I can see that's part of the problem. April was supposed to be a tremendous rebound, but the rebound wasn't as good as expected. But the media is trying to help all they can. You notice whenever the mainstream media reports the economy, even if they have to say something negative, they'll say, well, the actual job numbers are down. However, then they quote some economists who say, rosy days are ahead. The economy is about to explode. They always say something positive, even when they're giving negative news. So the public probably isn't aware that we've been in a stagnant, slow-growing economy, and some quarters no growth, for the last 5 to 6 years. And I'm not sure. They keep saying it's going to get better, but I don't know. Do you believe it?
Ron
No,
Paul.
and you know what's
Ron Paul keeps talking about it.
does he? You know what's even stranger about this right now with 100 million people not in the workforce? People are trying to hire people and they can't.
I've heard
Entry level jobs, nobody's taking them. You cannot hire someone for $8 an hour. They just won't work. I mean, it's next to impossible. So people, your convenience stores, your grocery stores and Walmarts and stuff. They have what do you call entry level jobs. They can't hire. Nobody will do the work. I mean, when I started, it was $3.25 an hour, and I was glad to get it. Now they don't want $8. They think they can just step out of school and drop on a $20 an hour job. It's insane.
it depends on the state and all those details and how much is reliable, of course. Some cases, you're better off to stay on various welfare programs and to get a job. And that's obviously a terrible situation for our government to allow to happen. They ought to work something out where they give you some bonus to take a job. But there are cases where people will tell you when you add it all up and the taxes and the things that you might lose by getting a job, you're better off to stay on welfare a few more years. That's terrible for our government to do that to people.
And
It's by design, though.
It's keeping people from getting married as well. A man and woman, they get married, then the welfare gets cut off. So they live together and they get the welfare. I know a fella, I'm told, haven't seen him do this, but he buys EBT cards from people, and 50 cents on the dollar, and then he sells them to people for 75 cents on the dollar, and he's got a business going doing that, and he's buying, I'm told, in stacks of inch high.
Not surprised.
And he sat there, did it in front of a friend of mine. He's a cop, and after he got done, he said, "You know I'm a cop, right?" And the guy that sold him, he pretty much got out of there. The other guy said, "Well, you're not going to do anything. You're a friend."
Jeez.
So what's the answer?
But I remember something that was said recently by what's the black candidate for president? What's his name again?
Carson.
Ben Carson. He was talking about how Rome decayed from within. They call it the rabble of Rome. Basically, Rome had their own welfare system, and at least it went up and down. But after a while, much of the citizens of Rome were so undermined by their own welfare system that they were too irresponsible to do anything but take the public dole. And that's the statement about Rome rotting from within. And he was implying that was slowly happening to America. And you got to admit, to some extent it's true. I guess that's the question, to what extent. I would say these elections in England at least tell me the English voters are not being bribed. In other words, The Labor Party says, we'll give you more government goodies, vote for us. The voters are smart enough to say, wait a minute, this is like short-term, benefits for long-term disaster. And I'm assuming that maybe voters in America might do the same next year. I could be wrong. And if that's the case, we make it more responsible government.
You know what? And speaking of elections, it's a perfect time for people to gossip and lie and tell stories about each other politically, and that happens to be kind of what our topic is tonight: gossip. We're going to see and hear a lot of it in the next couple years, or next year and a half till the next election.
They call it spin.
They call it, yeah. They have a good word for it. They call it spin. Well, the rest of us call it lies.
Spin. I want to read James 1:26. This scripture, when you look at it on its face, James 1:26, it has tremendous impact. Now, James, is blunt. That's why a lot of Protestant scholars don't like him. He's very blunt. James says, 1:26, if anyone among you thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless or vain. Let that statement sink in for a minute. To be a true Christian, you have got to learn, or we have got to learn, how to control our tongue.
Probably the hardest thing to do initially and the hardest thing to maintain, to sustain.
Yeah, I had a situation a week ago where there were some people there that I don't have a good opinion about, and I told my son, I said, I'm going to do my best to watch myself, and he said, just don't talk. Just don't talk. And
you will fail miserably if you try.
Oh, he knows me. And it was a tough subject. And a few hours later I called, and he said that the person came and explained why the situation was what it was, and thanked us for being the people to come up, thank mostly my son and my daughter-in-law for being the people to come up and fix some problems. So they did understand that what they had done was terrible. And so
if you would have jumped the
gun, I'd have blown it.
Yeah, you would have.
Yeah, and by the way, most people have had this experience. Someone will put you in, they'll say something that puts you in a bind, and before you realize it, something pops out of your mouth that isn't 100% true.
It's hard to catch words.
Think about it. It happened just like that.
Yeah. It's when somewhere I heard that when the moment you feel you have to say something, I think I said this before. I probably said it last week. The moment you say you're something in your head says you got to say something, you got to inject your opinion, you got to jump up and do something or say something right now. That's the exact time to keep your mouth shut.
Mm-hmm.
So you know,
and you'll be glad you did. Yeah.
No, I throughout my life, I've had. My mom used to tell me, your mouth's going to keep you in a lot of trouble, and I was a mouthy guy most of my life.
I think most of us, our mouth has gotten us into, when we were kids, fights and problems that we could have avoided if we'd been more cautious.
Well, one time,
I was looking at James 1:19. Gives us something about James chapter 1, verse 19. James says, so then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to speak. Swift to hear, swift to listen, slow to speak, slow to wrath or anger. So I wrote all three of those down. Well, it might be good to discuss it. First, be quick to listen. People say if you're going to be a great communicator, you should try to listen twice as much as you speak.
Yeah.
2
You
ears
know,
and 1 mouth.
when you find yourself in this situation and the adrenaline's pumping and you're thinking all these things, and speaking as a guy that grew up with 7 brothers and sisters over that period of time that we were growing up, I think probably all of us said something to one another at some time in our life that we'd give anything if we could take back. Because there are some particular, you can say something that people will never ever forget if you can't control that mouth.
Yep.
One time,
When I look at those that I said it to, my own brothers and sisters, I'm guilty. I wish I could go to them every day and apologize, and they understand it, they know it, but I still wished I wouldn't have done it.
that's everybody. You know, you growing up, your kids, you have an immature mind, and things don't look the way you think they should look, and you know you're not allowed to hit each other, so you lash out with words.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think I'd rather be hit than some of the words I've probably said or people have said to me.
Yeah, it would hurt less.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when someone does hurt you and you try to hurt them worse back, I mean, it just escalates. If you're the one who always diffuses that and shuts it down, you will get respect for that.
Now,
And like you said, I mean, on your list it says slow to speak.
One writer said that part of the
Go ahead.
part of the problem is that your brain goes so fast. Look, when you're listening to somebody, they say something, it triggers a thought, and it triggers another thought, triggers another thought. And they say, since your brain goes faster than the rate of speech of the person you're listening to, it will encourage you to want to jump in as soon as they pause and rattle off all the things you've been thinking about. Actually, better if you can try to think about, they call it active listening. If you can think about what they're saying instead of thinking about what you're going to say next when they pause. Because here's what has happened to me more than once. The person paused, and I'd jump in there and say what I was going to say. But then I started to get smarter, and I'd say, because someone told me this, count to about 5,000 or 6,000 when they pause before you say anything. And I started doing that. You find out when they pause, by the time you get 3,000 or 4,000, they're just kind of collecting their breath. They have a lot more to say, and it's good for you to hear the rest of what they say.
Yeah.
Listener, people will think you're a wonderful conversationalist and that you're smart because you listen to them.
Yep. A lot of people use that pause, or for one, there's a couple of things. They either a person doesn't pause ever, so they're trying to get in, or they want to show how smart they are, so they throw something into that pause to kind of show how smart they are or how dumb the other person is. They use the opportunity to do that with that pause, which just escalates everything.
One thing, if you're a good listener, you're communicating to the other person that what their ideas are important. And if you're a bad listener, you're communicating to them that their ideas are less important. So it sounds more loving to at least give a good listen to what they say, even if they're wrong.
Plus, if you're in a room or a group of people, especially in a meeting or something, and you're always the one that doesn't jump up and speak out, pretty soon the people around you start thinking you know something that they don't, because you're sitting there listening. Maybe you got a grin, or maybe you're just acting. Pretty soon they start thinking you know something more than you do about the subject. People will talk behind them. That guy knows something. He never says anything, but it makes people think that you're actually more wise, more intelligent for not jumping up and blurting things out.
I do sales, and people will come in and ask me about my school or whatever, and I ask them, what are you interested in doing? And then they will stand there and just rattle off stuff that maybe has really little to do with us, but I listen to them and I shake my head yes, like that, and I listen to them. When I get done, they go, what a great guy. Next thing you know, I mean, they're telling me personal things. They're telling me their life's history about their kids, their wife, whatever. And while they're doing that, I'm filling out a contract. And they sign it because I'm such a great guy. And I told them everything they wanted to hear, but I didn't tell them anything. I let them tell me what they wanted. And I just go, okay, good, sure. And here we go. And they will walk out there and say, man, that guy is really smart. That guy is really, and I didn't say anything. Because if I try to
sign them up for $100 a month program.
Give them what they want.
Yeah. But they'll tell me they're
And that third point that James made was slow to get angry. If someone says something that offends you, the Bible says a guy can control his temper is greater than a general. There's, I think if you can control your temper, you can stay out of a lot of trouble, even if they say something that offends you.
And I'm going to say this, it's easier to control your temper for whatever reason with strangers than with your loved ones.
Yeah.
And that's really sad, but it's true.
Your loved ones are supposed to know better.
That or
I was
just
thinking that. I was thinking that, but I wasn't going to go there.
it was that, or it's because you care about them so much. You don't care about the stranger's opinion. Some stranger doesn't like something about me, it doesn't hurt me any, but I want my family to respect me and to value me or whatever. So if I feel like they're not, I'm more likely to be short and hurtful with them because I do respect them. I do want them to respect me back. Some guy cuts me off in traffic or whatever, he's going to go home to his house.
Don't you think that the more humble you get, the harder it is to be offended? I mean, real humility, not, fake ones, but the real thing, where you're secure in who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely see that. Somebody insults you, you may not like it, but if you're secure in who you are, you don't need to get so offended.
Well, maybe I've done enough wrong in my life that I deserve it. On a certain level,
I'm sure in your case that's probably
I just knew you'd throw me under the bus.
On yourself.
As I'm blurting it out, I'm going, oh no, I'm going to get it.
You're going to, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't let that one slide by. Sorry, I should have practiced the slow to speak on that one. I'll have to work on that. My bad.
Unfortunately, a lot of times I'm hearing what you're hearing at the same time you're hearing it. It wasn't playing in my head, or it sounded one way in my head and very different in my mouth.
That's the stuff that gets us all in trouble.
Yeah. It didn't sound so bad until I said it.
The fact is that the four of us and other people like us in the church who God has brought us to a certain place within this church that other people look to. And that amplifies our responsibility greatly. So we have to learn to do this if we are to rise to the position that God put us in. We have to do it.
And we got to be quick to repent if we blurt something that's hurtful and go right to the person and say, hey, that's not how I meant I needed that to come out. It's not what I was thinking, and you have to go to that right to the individual and repent, because you'll be amazed at how people's thought process will change and stuff. I teach children, and I'll tease with them sometimes, and I think, was that really the right way? Maybe that child's mind doesn't understand teasing at that age. And I go right to them and say, I'm teasing, right? I don't really mean that. I was trying to be funny. And most of the time they go, yeah, it was funny or whatever. But, you gotta be a person that looks in the mirror and says, oh, did I say that? And run straight to them and shake their hand, sit down, talk with them, and and make sure they understood that that's not how you meant it or whatever. A lot of people just hope it goes away, and I try to run straight in and fix it.
Well, that's a good practice.
Yeah.
Reading James chapter 3, which is more or less what we're talking about is based on. It starts right out and it says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep the whole body in check. We will be judged more strictly." So our responsibility is at a much higher level if we are to be the teachers.
And the part about everybody stumbles in word unless you're a perfect man. So everybody's got to stumble on some words sooner or later. So you got to work on it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think once you're baptized, you have more of a propensity to constantly be checking yourself, checking up, checking what you're gonna say. You're more conscious, I think. We're where you should be, or we should be, about what we are saying and how we're saying it. Just since since baptism.
When you're a little kid on the playground, even when you get 11, 12, and 13, they always said sticks and stones can hurt.
Break
my bones, but words can never hurt me. Generally, they say that after they've been offended by words to make themselves feel better. But the truth is, most of the hurt as a child when you're growing up on the playground, most of the hurt you get and slights come from words and not from actual fights. And as you get bigger, you actually have very few physical fights. Most of it is what people say, well, to your face and behind your back, but you hear about it later. And kids are really mean to each other verbally.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ruthless.
Yeah, I mean, it's petty. And that brings us to another subject, social media as a vehicle to supercharge destructive gossip.
Yep. And what Dave was saying was a good segue. He said, well, it sounded better in my head, but as it was coming out, it didn't come out the way that I wanted it to be perceived. And when people are typing stuff on Facebook or Google Plus or Twitter or whatever they're using, a lot of times, it's the worst place because you cannot see emotion. And the words, when read dry as they are, you don't get the inflection, you don't get the little quirks for the eyebrow raise or the chuckle, and it can read the completely wrong way, and pretty soon you got World War III with a couple of friends over something that the one intended it to be seen this way, and the person read it this way.
I sent a text message to my son. He had taken my truck to do something with it. I don't know if he was working on it or he needed a truck. And so I just sent a plain message, "Hey, dude, I need my truck back." And he said, "Oh no, I've upset my dad." And he started calling, and I answered the phone because I missed a call or two. And he's like, "Dad, what did I do? Did I do something to upset you?" I said, "No, I just need my truck back. When is it coming back? And if you need it for a few more days, that's okay." He said, "But Dad, when I read it, it was give me my truck." This is what it looked like. And he says, "I thought, oh, what did I do? I'm so upset." And I was like, "No, I do need my vehicle, but you can use it as long as you need it, but just let me know." So it doesn't come across the same. A year or so ago, I put a video of a young girl punching pads on Facebook, and a couple of guys came on and said, how easily they could beat her up, and posted that on my Facebook. And the lady working for me went on and she said, "Most people think how neat the young girl's keeping herself healthy and she's trying to learn to protect herself. What kind of a family did you come from where you look at a little girl and think about beating her up?" And she posted that. She said, "What kind of a family could you raise you that you would think like this?" And then I think she said something about, "Here's our address. I'm a woman. Come down here and try to beat me up." And I'm telling you right now, he couldn't.
He couldn't?
No. Oh, this is a redneck woman, let me tell you.
But social media, it just adds to the one of the other conduits, one of the other forms of communication that can go bad. That we always, especially because there's a fairly large group of us that are all friends on Facebook, and I've seen little bitty spats and things go back and forth. I know I've deleted several things in the past because when I typed it, I was laughing at my end, but then I'm reading it, I'm like, they may not get that. The person that they may not understand that, so I'll delete it. And I know people have deleted stuff that they've sent me, thinking I'd be upset by what they said. So, but social media, I think Christians just need to understand that this is another way. It's not our tongue, but it's just as if we said it. And it's even worse because we don't get to add the emotion into it, and they can read it any way they want. The person reading it, they could be having a bad day, anything could be going wrong, and then you say something kind of smart aleck or whatever, and they say, oh, here's just another. And this is my friend, and this is how they're talking to me. Just add to it. Something we just need to be aware of. Unless you're posting to Kelly, then say anything you like. He don't care.
I think what James was saying earlier about humbleness is very important because if you can maintain humbleness and learn to be humble, that creates a buffer between you and anybody with an acid tongue. And humbleness can also be an extremely powerful weapon against that irresponsibility.
Probably a year ago, I was driving home and talking on the phone with a buddy of mine that I've known for over 20 years. And I cut this lady off. And she stopped dead in the intersection, rolled her window down, and gave me a whole bunch of Y4. And I rolled down my window, and he was still on the phone. I said, "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm not paying attention. I'm an idiot. I messed up. Just go." And she wouldn't go. She had to keep yelling at me. I kept saying, "You're right. Just go now. You yelled at me. I did it wrong. It was dumb of me to do this. I'm sorry." And finally, after it seemed like minutes, it was probably 20 seconds, she drove off, and I got back to talking to my buddy, and he was laughing like all on the phone. And I said, "What is so funny?" He goes, 20 years ago, you'd have jumped out of your car and beat her up or something. And I said, "I hope not." And he says, that getting married helps you. And I said, "I hope it's God working in my life, not my wife working in my life." But 20 years ago when I met him, I was 20 years younger, and when your only tool's a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Boy, this road rage is a perfect example of tongues out of control.
Yeah, back in the day, 25 years ago, I had no problem with road rage. But now people get shot that do that. I'm more likely to stay in my vehicle and be quiet.
But I was thinking, some people look at the social media like pouring gasoline on a fire. So a couple of teenagers say something bad to one teenager, and then they replicate it and add some other bad remarks, and they send it out to 100 people, who send it out to 500 people.
Now you're talking about, instead of just a couple people, you're talking about a thread where some, like a troll, inserts their self into the conversation, light everybody up, and then they kind of drift off and leave a mess in their wake, and then people just start allowing the troll to get them fired up. And, you see that a lot where people, in the tech stuff, it's everywhere. You got your Apple fanboys, your Android, all that kind of stuff, but it brings people out, and they insert themselves into the conversation. They stir the pot just because they can, and then the people that have been done to it by the troll allows it, instead of saying, well, this guy just he just inserted himself into this conversation, and you can choose not to be taken in and just deal with this person on the other end, this friend or what have you, normally, or you can allow this third party, kind of like Satan, sticking his nose in and allowing him to stir up what wouldn't have been an issue, but with two friends. We see that in the church sometimes, where someone will insert themselves into a situation and then stir. Sometimes maybe an outsider will come in and stir the pot between two normal friends, and get things fired up. It's Satan working behind the scenes to try and pull us apart. We just got to be aware of that when it happens, and have enough sense to know, hey, I know this friend, I know this pal. I'm not going to let this person destroy this relationship.
You know, it's interesting to point out, and we should all realize this, but even Moses had a temper. And because of his tongue, he was forbidden to go into the promised land.
And he was called the most meek man in the Bible.
Yeah. And another point that I looked over here, Jesus actually referred to James and John as sons of thunder at one point. It was in reference of the fact that they could lose it.
Yep, they probably were very. I mean, obviously Peter is the first one you think of, but some of those apostles were quick to speak and slow to think.
Yeah.
And I've thought about people who stir up things on Twitter. Heard on the radio, and I didn't get all the details, but say if you go to a school board meeting and you say something politically incorrect, but as a Christian you believe it. There are people who will go on Twitter, according to this guy, and they will just pound you. Then they have a big Twitter file, and then others who have big Twitter files pick it up, and they'll just pound you and pound you. So the thousands of people are criticizing you on Twitter or Facebook or whatever else is out there because you said something politically incorrect at the school board meeting. And I'm like, boy, that's terrible. It's almost like there are people online who are like, you know, the people who write viruses. In some cases, they don't benefit from it. They just like to cause trouble.
And by the way,
yeah, absolutely.
By the way, did you know that the disciples drove a Honda?
Oh yeah, I wondered how they got around back then.
The Bible says they were in one accord.
One accord.
I
drive an accord. Tell my wife we have a spiritual car.
I don't blame them for being mad about that.
Cramped. And the last thing we had on our list was, if we want to change our tongue, we need to change our heart. Because isn't what's inside of you what pops out of your mouth?
Well, I believe Jesus addressed that when they talked about washing pots and this kind of stuff and eating things that had not been gone through all the ritual traditions. And he says it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, because that soon leaves the body, but it's what comes out of the mouth that defiles the man. Because what comes out of your mouth is what's going on in your head.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Just something just a couple of verses here that's kind of go along with this last section we've been talking about. Proverbs 26. If you go through verses 20 and 22, let me see if I'm in the right place here. 26, 20 to 22, and the BBE version says 26, 20 to 22. So without wood, the fire goes out. If there is no secret talk, argument is ended. And it says, as charcoal is to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. This kind of goes to the troll bit we were just talking about. 22, the words of a table bearer, says the words of one who says evil of his neighbors, also as translation. Secretly are like sweet food. They go down into the inner parts of the stomach. So it's kind of Proverbs 26 in there. It talks about the people who stir stuff up. And if there's no one stirring it up, there's no issue. There's no issue at all. And Ecclesiastes has one I kind of like here. 10. Ecclesiastes 10. Let's see here. 11. Is it 11? 11, I think, is where it goes. If it's wise man, no sweet. Okay. The foolish are full of words. Man has no knowledge of what will be, and who is able to say what will be after him? Oh, that's not the one I'm looking for. Anyway, these if you read Ecclesiastes 10, I think it's 11 through 15. It kind of it explains it better there.
Oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
looking at Ecclesiastes 10:11.
Yeah. It says, if a snake gives a bite before the word of power is said, there is no longer any use in the word of power. That's the basic English translation. Some of this stuff, it helps, I think, to translate it a little plainer.
This translations. Go ahead, Ken.
Go ahead.
My translation says, verse 11, a serpent may bite when it is not charmed. The babbler is no different. He's comparing, let's say, the guy that babbles on, like the bite of a serpent. The
Yep.
words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up.
Yep.
And the words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness.
I like that one. That's kind of my favorite.
And I guess the one thing about gossip is that you like hearing something bad about somebody else because you say to yourself, well, I would never do that. I'm better than that. And you kind of start stroking yourself. But really, we don't need that kind of thing, do we?
No, we shouldn't. We shouldn't.
That's like raising yourself up by pulling other people down to your level.
Yeah, or pulling. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. There's a saying I've used at work many times. There's two kinds of people in this world: those who build the tallest buildings, and those who knock everybody else's building down around them to make theirs look taller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that mentality is found in Satan. You can see Garden of Eden. If he couldn't have everything he wanted, he was going to find a way to take it from us. And then you look at Saddam Hussein. If he can't have everything he wants, he can't have Kuwait, then he'll burn the oil fields so nobody can have them. And that's
Scorched earth policy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what he's doing. He's going to wipe the planet out if you don't get it his way.
So we need to remember that as recipients of privileged information that God has seen fit to give us, with that privilege goes great responsibility. We have to be examples.
Yeah, it's a bit sobering, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sobering.
We're kind of quoting Stan Lee now. Spider-Man.
Is that what he said in Spider-Man?
Yeah, with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I hope we don't have to pay royalties on that.
Oh, well. I was thinking about, we're going to be talking about the meaning of Pentecost next weekend. Isn't that right, Ken?
Yes, looking at the schedule, it would look like it, yes. Next week is 5:15.
Now I want to encourage people to go to Pentecost, and if you're able to make it to Land Between the Lakes, Mark will be there, and Ken will be there, Kelly will be there, and I'll be there, and many others. We're going to discuss the desperate need for America to have a revival and how to strengthen ourselves with using the Holy Spirit, as well as interesting sermons, sermonettes, etc., and a good social Saturday night. Because it's a holiday weekend, we want to discourage people from waiting till the last second to get motel rooms. Also, the church has special rates, but you know how it is. If you wait till the night before, and the motel can get plenty of other people, they may not honor it. So you might get it, but you might not. So I want to encourage people to try to get a room for Saturday night. We start 2:30 Saturday, Land Between the Lakes. And one thing they can't say this year, the gas prices are too high for me to travel.
No, they're not. It's you know, it's still strange that we're saying 249 or 259 is not bad, but I guess everything is relative.
Yeah. Gas was real cheap in Arkansas. It was like $2.13, $2.19, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, unfortunately, I won't be traveling through there to get to Kentucky, so.
Yeah, you got to travel through Illinois where gas is super high.
But yeah, get there, and I see that there was a new upload to the ICG Area 4 YouTube channel, so I'll probably be watching that tomorrow with my oatmeal to see what y'all have to say. So I encourage anybody, if you subscribe to these channels, you get alerts when new things get uploaded. If you subscribe to Line Upon Line 2810 on YouTube, you'll get notified when new things get uploaded or when programs are scheduled. If you have a Google Plus account, then you can join in the chat during this. We don't get much chat going on, but there is a chat channel. If you're joined to Google Plus, you can speak or you can type in. I think it's a group chat, so I think anybody in there can talk back and forth. Plus, we'll see it, and if you have a question or comment or something, we can read it on the air. So, just a couple of things to keep in mind.
You could also go to icgarea4.com, and on the website we've got like 5 going on 6 years of material. You could download the audio to your MP3 player or your computer, and you can listen to these things in the car. We've even gotten some new Bible translations and sermon material from the church website as well, the big church website. And the audios you can easily download, and you can listen to them at night sometimes. Oddly enough, listening to something like that helps put you to sleep. You turn the lights out. It's like you're surrounded by Bible.
I wasn't going to go there and say that you should listen to your sermons if you have trouble, trouble sleeping, if you have insomnia, to throw on a couple of sermons there, but hey, I guess whatever works.
I mean, I know I shouldn't say that, but it is worked. I'm not going to mention which ministers are the best for my nighttime rest because I want to stay out of trouble. But it's amazing. Some voices are more soothing than others. People have their own preference. But it's like your mind says, oh, okay, that's interesting, but I don't think I want to learn too much right now. But yet you're getting it subconsciously, and you just go to sleep, and you're kind of learning it, but you're resting. It's like being surrounded by the Bible.
Yeah, you know what? I use the Bible for that. I have an app, and then I can listen live, or I can listen to the Bible. And right now, I'm back. I just had to go back to Genesis because I went through it again. So I'm in Genesis. I hit play, and the guy talks, a nice kind of monotone, kind of, and it's nice and soothing. And I listen, and I go to sleep.
Same here. We've got several translations. We've got a new one called The Message. I'm not saying it's good for everything. There are a few translation spots where God puts Protestant doctrine in, but I kind of expect that, really. But he's very good about others. And you listen to that at night, and we've got other translations too. And it's like being surrounded by the Bible, and you're just listening. Now, if I try to watch something on TV, it won't put me to sleep. Well, there are a lot of TV shows that are so boring they put me to sleep. That's another story. But you know what I'm saying? When you look at something, you're more likely to stay awake. But listening and then turn the lights out, it's very relaxing. It's like the Bible is all around you.
Well, sometimes for me, it adds another dimension because, the Bible can have deeper and deeper meanings the more you learn about a section. And the other night, I forget exactly what it was, but something in Genesis, some switch went off, and it said, "Oh, when I understand." It might have opened up what to me would have been a deeper meaning to one part of the Bible that I'd never seen it quite that way, but because I was relaxed, because I was open to it, it just kind of the way it was read, I was like, oh, now that's a little different. That's makes more sense to another kind of plane of understanding of something in Genesis.
Anyway,
we all learn at a different rate, different pace, different methods. So,
and on long drives, having something of various sorts, we have different things to listen to besides talk radio, but you can't always get that where you want and what you want. I just find it makes the drive more interesting.
it does. I like at church. I was given a website for old radio programs, so I've been downloading them all this week. I've downloaded a bunch of old radio programs, listening to them too. So, well, I think I'm just kind of droning on and on and on here. So, does anybody have anything else they want to say about guarding our tongue?
The only thing I'm going to say is one time in front of a preacher, I said, "I do."
It'll get you in trouble, man. And now look at you.
20 years later.
20 years later.
Refresh my memory. Who was it and what Bible story was it about the man that said something that's so vile that God wouldn't let him speak for a period of time?
I believe it's in Matthew. It's one of the priests, but he didn't have faith in what the angel told him about the Messiah's coming. That may not be the example you're thinking of, but until the baby came, he couldn't speak.
Oh, you're talking. I think there's two different things. John the Baptist's father.
But that may not be what you're referring to.
I'm not sure what I'm referring to here, but
There's that and something maybe in Nehemiah, Ezra, or something back then. There was one where the man could not speak until the baby was born.
yeah.
Yeah, John the Baptist's father was one.
John the Baptist's father couldn't speak.
There is a man, and I know people won't understand it. There's a man in the Old Testament. I guess he was an Egyptian with the Israelites when they were camping out, and he led a vile stream of cursing at God. It was a pretty strong one, long one. And Moses said, "Well, what should I do about it?" God had him put to death. I know people will say, just because he cursed God and ran in a rave, I think the way God looked at it, he didn't want to do what God wanted him to do as well. It was disobedience too. But I think God looked at it as there's in-your-face rebellion, and then there's weakness. And I think God looked at it, if we let this guy get away with this in-your-face rebellion and disrespect, things in the camp are going to go down even faster than they are now. Now, obviously, God doesn't do that most of the time. That was a rare exception. But saying horrible things about God is not too smart.
No.
And sometimes you got to make an example. I had a student giving me he couldn't straighten up in class, and I threw him out, and everybody knows I threw him out.
All right. Well, good night, everybody. Unless you got something else to add, it's about 10 o'clock our time here. So with that being said, don't forget, subscribe to the ICG Area 4 if you can. And we'll see you all next week, and hopefully we'll see you all at Pentecost.
So glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.
See, I get to bounce around while he's playing because y'all can't see me, so.
Good
night, everybody. Good night.
Good night.